a lot of community members and press here today. I'm the principal here, Cindy Whistler, and I want to welcome you to Jackson. This is a very special day for us. We're very excited to host this event today. So I'd like to say welcome to the governor, to the Department of Ed, to members of the Iowa History Advisory Council, the director of the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, and many press members out there. We hope that you find this fun today. Our kids, we don't know what to expect. We're excited about this. This is our first press conference. So thank you for coming, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker, our governor, Terry Branstad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Principal Whistler, thank you for hosting us here at Jackson Elementary, and thank you for that nice introduction. I also want to acknowledge Ryan Wise, who's Director of the Department of Education for the state, is also here with us today. My wife volunteers and helps the teachers with reading, working with some of the students, and it's something that she really enjoys here at Jackson. I'm pleased to be joined this morning by Stephanie Wager, who is the Social Studies Consultant for the Department of Education, Tom Moraine, an Iowa History Advisory Council member who has served in many different capacities, including he was once administrator of the Iowa Historical Society, Mary County, who's a director of the Department of Cultural Affairs, and Owen Buckland, a third grader here at Jackson. Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds couldn't join us this morning as she's traveling the state. Our topic this morning is how to make Iowa history come alive for more Iowa students. As many of you may know, I have a passion for history, and especially Iowa history. I love to read about Iowa history in the Iowa History Journal and books on historical figures and events. In December, when I became the longest serving governor in American history, we created the Iowa History Fund as a nonprofit organization to promote Iowa history for the benefit of future generations and to revitalize some of the historical objects we have around the state that may have fallen into disrepair. The fund is financed by private contributions and proceeds of the sale of the biography, all of the sales of this book go into the Iowa History Fund. The book was written by Mike Chapman, who's a journalist from Newton, who's written 27 biographies. A board reviews and ultimately decides on what projects will receive funding, and we're able to give modest contributions of $10,000. The first one was for the restoration of Governor Merrill's grave at Woodland Cemetery here in Des Moines. Not long before we started the Iowa History Fund, I asked the Iowa Department of Education to form an Iowa History Advisory Council to recommend on how we can improve the teaching of Iowa history in Iowa schools. Currently, there's only a vague requirement that Iowa history instruction occur in grades 1 through 6th. Better understanding Iowa's fascinating past with authentic sources and many perspectives helps us to better understand the present and hopefully prepare for a bright future. It also promises to strengthen students' understanding and pride in our state. I now want to ask an Iowa history trivia question. So students, raise your hands if you know the answer. This is a tough question because it happened a long time ago. Who designed the Iowa flag? Does anybody know who designed the Iowa flag? Like I said, it's a tough question. Okay. Well, a Knoxville, Iowa resident named Dixie Cornell Gebhardt is who designed the flag, and it was in 1917. Today we have an early version. This is something she drew herself of the Iowa flag, and this is what the flag now looks like. She designed both versions. This original version, which is in the normally in the historical building over in the Department of Cultural Affairs, and this is the one you see flying. And did you know that this flag has a vertical tricolor of blue, white, and red, and it's designed after the French flag because Iowa was once part of the French Louisiana Territory. You may know that Thomas Jefferson made a great deal when he bought the Louisiana Purchase from France. And Iowa was part of that. And the French flag has equal blue, white, and red. But the Iowa flag has a whiter white so they could have the American eagle and our motto, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain on the flag. It's interesting to know that Iowa was really in no rush to adopt the state flag. In fact, during the Civil War, we did not have a state flag. We became a state in 1846, but this wasn't until about 1917 because most Iowans felt the stars and stripes of the American flag adequately represented all states. We had a higher percentage of the residents of Iowa fought to save the Union than any other state, about 13%. And I've been down to Vicksburg, Mississippi, where we restored the Iowa Monument. And Iowans played a very important role in preserving the Union. So it tells us Iowans have always been kind of modest people. We don't brag a lot, but we do have a proud history and heritage. And we want to preserve that history and heritage so that future generations will know the wonderful things that Iowans have done throughout our history. The recommendations presented today reflect a great deal of thoughtful work that's been done by the Iowa History Advisory Council. The timing could not be better because a new draft of the state social studies standards are expected out this fall with an emphasis on Iowa history. Thank you to the council and to Stephanie Wager, who led the council's work. Now, I'm pleased to turn the podium over to Stephanie to highlight some of the council's recommendations. Stephanie?
Good morning. Good morning, students. How are you guys today? Good. You guys have been sitting very patiently. I'm happy to see that. Thank you, Governor. Thank you also to Principal Whistler for hosting us today at Jackson Elementary. And I also want to thank the members of the Iowa History Advisory Council for taking the time to participate in this important work and making these recommendations to systemically improve the teaching and learning of Iowa history. I am the social studies consultant at the Iowa Department of Education, and as part of that role, I facilitated the council. I love Iowa history. It's kind of a nerd thing. That might sound like a catchy phrase for a t-shirt, but it's true. I was born and raised here, and my family was one of the first families to settle Grimes, Iowa, and that's where I live today. I am proud of my state and its history, and in school, I remember learning about Iowa's important civil rights history and our significant role in feeding the world. As a former social studies teacher, I taught my students about Iowans like Edna Griffin, who spoke out against racial injustice after being refused service at the Katz drugstore, which is just really a few miles from here. A great story about Iowa history. I taught them about Norman Borlaug and his role in saving over 1 billion people worldwide from starvation. Unfortunately, the Iowa History Advisory Council found that today, many Iowa students are not getting the opportunity to learn about Iowa's history. They are not getting a chance to learn about Iowa's important role within our nation's history or to explore ways in which they themselves can impact their community and state and be a part of that history. In surveying Iowa teachers and stakeholders, 24% of them indicated that they had never had the opportunity to formally study Iowa history during their K-12 experience. 53% indicated that they do not currently teach Iowa history as part of their social studies curriculum. Many of these stakeholders cited other areas being deemed a higher priority for why they were not teaching Iowa history. In the same survey, an overwhelming majority cite the need for greater access to resources and professional development in order to teach Iowa history. What emerged in the survey is in line with the recommendations of the Iowa History Advisory Council. The recommendations summarize the council's work in thinking about how to systematically improve the teaching and learning of Iowa history in K-12 schools. The council organized its recommendations into three main areas that needed to be addressed in order to improve the teaching and learning of Iowa history. They are addressing systems issues, increasing the availability of instructional resources, and increasing access to professional development for teachers in Iowa history. Some highlights of the recommendations include ensuring that the council continues to meet to ensure that the recommendations are implemented, investigating the creation of an online Iowa history elective course for any Iowa high school student, encouraging Iowa's public and private institutions of higher education to incentivize Iowa history research and require Iowa history content for pre-service teachers, encourage greater accountability for the teaching of social studies and Iowa history, and create a hub for Iowa history resources to be linked so that teachers can find them and access these materials. The governor also alluded to the fact that Iowa history is currently required to be taught sometime between 1st and 6th grade. However, there are no Iowa history requirements in our current social studies standards. A state team tasked with drafting new academic standards in social studies is expected to include Iowa history. These standards will be released this fall for public review. This Iowa history problem is not just one for those who care passionately about the subject. It is a problem for all Iowans. Knowing about your community and your state helps make you a better citizen in the community. Preparing students to be good citizens is the original purpose of public education. Now I'll turn the podium over to Tom Moraine.
Stephanie, I want to ask you a question. You said you grew up in Grimes.
I did.
Okay, what is the city of Grimes named? Who is the city of Grimes named after?
Governor Grimes.
And where do you work?
I work at the Iowa Department of Education, the Grimes building.
So she's got a real connection with Iowa history. So.
I do.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that out.
Thank you very much, Governor.
If you're going to ask me a question, do it now and get it over with.
I'm not going to ask you a question. You know a lot about Iowa history, too.
I've lived it. I worked at Living History Farms, and it was one of the best jobs I ever had because you got to see people actually living the way people used to live, how they used to farm with horses, how they used to farm with oxen, going clear back. We had a wonderful program in the summer. It was a summer day camp program where kids your age could come out and spend 5 days working at different historical areas, doing things the way people used to do them. We had a general store. And the speakers in the general store, the people who did it, were absolutely amazing. And they could talk to you for hours about anything. And we had an old house, a mansion, where people lived in a very high lifestyle. I have 2 sons, and both of those sons went to day camp. The older son is about 4 years older than the younger son, and they had bunk beds. And the older son was on the top bunk bed after his first day coming back from Living History Farms. And I was in the hallway listening to him after they were in bed. And he said verbatim, word for word, what the interpreter at the general store had told him. And then he said verbatim what the woman in the fancy house had told him. I know for a fact they never listened to me that closely, ever. What is exciting about history as we're going to do it now is that we're going to make it come to life. We're going to make it so that you can go to spots where historic things happen, where important things happen, where a woman held a lantern up on a rainy night and prevented a train from driving over a bridge that was going to collapse. She saved hundreds of people on that night in Iowa history. We're going to show you where inventions have been made that have changed the world. The computer What you hold in your hand was invented here in Iowa, and the story of how it was invented is an incredible story. What's so exciting in the recommendations that the new way of teaching history is going to come around is that you're not going to just read about history. You're not going to just read what other people tell you happened. You're going to get to do history. You're going to get to go to places where history happened. You're going to get to read what people who were living those events really thought. And that's going to be a whole new way of experience what history is going to be about. History, the able to do it. They're able to think the way they thought, to put together your own story. That's coming, and those are some exciting recommendations that are coming out of the new way of thinking about history. You're the lucky ones because you're going to get to try out these new advances, and it's going to be you who experiences history in an all new way. Good luck. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mary County, who is now the director of the Department of Cultural Affairs. She happens to be one of my son's bosses, and I hope he listens to her more than he ever listened to me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie, Tom, and Governor Branstad for your ongoing support of Iowa history. And thank you to Jackson Elementary for such a warm welcome. You guys are being so good, so patient. I promise I'm going to be brief because we're going to get to your favorite pal over here, Owen, okay? Just a minute. As the governor mentioned, my name is Mary County, director of the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, and I'm really delighted to share with you all today's big news. Our department, as has been mentioned before, includes the State Historical Society of Iowa. And let me tell you, nobody is more committed to Iowa history education than the experts on our staff. As caretakers of the state's collection of more than 200 million artifacts and documents, our team works every day to preserve that collection for future generations, including all of you. So I'm especially pleased to announce that the Department of Cultural Affairs just won a highly competitive grant of nearly $100,000 from the Library of Congress, which will help teachers across the state fulfill the Department of Education's new recommendations in some exciting new ways. And a huge thank you to the real members of our team who led the effort, Jen Cooley and Stephanie, who spoke earlier, along with our congressional staff, the congressional delegation who work in Washington. They also helped support and make phone calls and write letters to help us get this grant for Iowa. This grant is going to allow us scan and digitize important documents from our collection here in Des Moines, as well as the Library of Congress, so that any teacher or student with a computer can have primary source materials right at their fingertips. That means that students like you can study some of the actual photos and documents, like the flag behind us, that tell the story of Iowa's Native Americans, or the Underground Railroad, or the Cold War. Students right here in Iowa will be able to study some of the files of President Herbert Hoover, who grew up in West Branch here in Iowa. And at the Department of Cultural Affairs, we understand that teachers are often asked to do more with less. So we're encouraged by this grant, which will give teachers handy, reliable tools to enrich their lessons with some of those key photos and documents that really bring Iowa history to life for all of you. It's our job to help Iowans understand that fascinating history happens right here, and we have the artifacts and documents to prove it. So we applaud the governor for making Iowa history a priority, and we can't wait to work with the governor and the Department of Education on this important new project. So thank you all. And now it's my distinct honor to turn over the microphone to a third grade historian who studies right here with all of you. And I want you to give him the loudest applause you've ever given.
Hello, my name is Owen Buckland, and I'm here to talk about Iowa history. If you know me, you probably know I love history. I have two reasons for this. My first reason is that One of the first books I read was a book about the 1800s when you had to go out and hunt for meat instead of buying it in a store. My other reason is that my mom takes me to the Iowa Historical Building about 5 times a year, and I think the subject of history should be taught more in schools. History is such an interesting topic, and wouldn't you feel bad if your children didn't know about this great state of Iowa? The students of Des Moines need a better understanding of the past so they can build a better future. All I'm saying is that the world can be changed by teaching children history. That's all I need to say on this bright Tuesday morning. Goodbye.
Very good. Good job, Owen.
Good job. Awesome job, bud. Let's give Owen a big round of applause. What a great speech.
Okay. We'd open it for your questions on this subject first. We'll do questions from the media on other subjects also later, but are there questions on this subject first? Yes, we're going to be looking at the recommendations in terms of both state funding and private. We're looking at a public-private partnership. The grant is a very significant boost, but we're also looking at what the state can do and also what kind of private resources we may also get contributed for this. But I'm very excited about this. I see this as a real opportunity to revitalize the teaching of Iowa history and make it really come alive for the students of today and the students of tomorrow. We'll be looking at the recommendations. You probably are aware that it's a difficult budgeting year. State revenues are going to be a challenge, but I'm proud to say that we have a balanced budget. We made the tough decisions, and we're one of the best managed states. But obviously, because of the farm income and what's happened to the price of commodities with the EPA not supporting the robust renewable fuel standard, it's driven down the price that farmers receive, and it's also cost us jobs in farm machinery manufacturing. So we're facing some challenges, but we're going to do the best we can. This is a priority of mine. I'm very hopeful it will also receive a welcome response in the legislature, as we think it certainly is receiving among the people that have been involved in preparing this study. Well, it varies from school to school. I went to high school. Well, that's a good question. And I think that's the sort of thing that we're going to be looking at with the new social studies standards. I can tell you my personal experience in 8th grade, I had 2 great history teachers. Lyra Seawick, who taught U.S. history, and the media is probably tired of hearing this. She taught the 3 R's of good government, rights, part of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, but she also taught us respect for other people and their rights and responsibility of being a good citizen, of being honest, giving back, helping others, and all those things that are important of participating. Also, I had Fred Smith, who taught Iowa history and civics, and he really made it come alive. In the Mansion Museum in Fort City, is still preserved the Iowa history notebook that I put together as an assignment for his class.
I think that's a very complicated question to answer. It is certainly required in code in terms of content specifications, but it's a difficult thing to have accountability around. When we have that in code, we suggest that. I think, as the governor alluded to, that with those draft standards having Iowa history in it, that will clear up some of that kind of lack of communication with it being in code and not in our current standards. That's led to some difficulty there.
Well, the administrative code, I think, first of all, we have the law of the state. And as you said, it's mentioned in the law of the state, but it's not in the present state standards. So the new standards are going to make it clear this is something that's expected. And I think that goes a long ways to signaling to teachers in the schools, this is something that is expected. And we also are a state that believes in local flexibility to determine how it best fits into the curriculum in individual schools. But it is something that I think is important and something that I think is very, it's near and dear to my heart. And I just say that I want to do all I can to encourage and support it because I think it's made a real difference in my life and I think in the lives of many other people. Well, I just think it's basic. And you look at other states like Texas, and they put a real strong emphasis on their state's history. And the people in Texas have a great pride in their history. So I think, and we have every reason to have as much pride in Iowa history as not. As governor, I get the opportunity of presenting the Iowa Award. That was started by Governor Robert Blue, who was governor when we had the centennial of statehood. And it's given to outstanding Iowans that have made a real contribution. And the next award recipient is going to be John Papajohn, who's done so much. And of course, the last one to receive that award was Ambassador Ken Quinn. So we have the Iowa History Journal, which comes out every 2 months. I read it cover to cover because I think it's got some great pictures as well as great stories about the state of Iowa, our history and heritage. Well, I don't know that I'm going to try to identify something that should be taught less. I just think it's a matter of emphasis. And we, you know, and I think it varies from school to school. I think some schools probably do a very good job with it, but we're hopeful the new state standards will give us greater emphasis and we can give some really wonderful material that teachers can use to really make history come alive.
Did you say, well, yeah, it could, and that'll be determined as we work through the process in terms of what will actually be digitized and go online? I'd say it could. I'd say there's probably a good chance, but again, we'll have to work through that. There's clearly going to have to be a prioritization effort because we won't be able to get everything online. So we'll have to work to determine that. And we're already able to better determine through feedback on our website in terms of, you know, who is utilizing the collection and how they're utilizing it. And again, we'll work with this new report along with the Department of Education too, in a collaborative effort to determine what should be online.
So what do you guys do about the fact that you've got stacks and stacks of newspapers for years and years going back? Are those things just going to sit? They're going to be thrown in the dumpster?
No, they're not going to be thrown away. And we're looking at ways that we can preserve it. And things are done differently today. A lot of the newspapers themselves are digitized. And I think we want to do that systematically over time. It's a matter of having the resources to do it. But I'll tell you, there's just a valuable amount of information there. A lot of the history books that have been written using old newspaper articles. I've written, well, for instance, Andrew Haugen was a congressman from Northwood, Iowa. I read the book about him. Very interesting. He was elected in 1898. That was when the old historical building was dedicated in 1898. The Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives was from Iowa, and Iowa had 11 Republican congressmen. And he served until 1932. He lost in the Roosevelt landslide of 1932. But reading the history of that, a lot of it came from newspaper articles in the past. And so we don't want to lose that history. We want that history to be available and for future generations to be able to learn from it. He was, by the way, nominated by convention. And the convention, I think, went like 300 ballots. And he actually defeated an incumbent and another he was the dark horse candidate, but he went on to serve from 1898 to 1932. So that's an important part of our history. He was, by the way, the co-author of the McNary-Haugen Farm Bill, which was a very famous farm bill back in the 20s. It was unfortunately vetoed by Calvin Coolidge.
We're gonna have the media hold on. The students are gonna exit out of here.
We'll go on to other subjects.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the students, Principal Whistler, I think was gonna leave you out here.
Okay.
You guys did a great job.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you.
Good listeners.
Thank you.
Stay here.
Well, I see in Grimes they have pictures of banners of the governor.
Yes,
So
yeah,
they've
they
done a great
renamed
job.
our square the governor's district because of that. So and they have a little museum and everything now. So it's great.
You're just emphasizing Iowa aspect of America.
Hey, Governor. Hey, Governor. Would you get a picture with Owen by the podium?
Sure.
Hey, Owen, come here, pal.
Okay, come on.
Come here, Owen. Just come right up here. You guys get it right in front.
Okay, there
Good job.
we go. Okay. You're welcome. Thank you, Owen. Good job. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, listen, on some of these questions, if you give, step right up. Yeah, do that because. Okay. One of the things that was just pointed out to me by our presenters is that one of the things that they're recommending is that when U.S. history is taught, teachers will be given Iowa examples, like on the civil rights movement, where you'll have live examples of what happened here in the state of Iowa, or Underground Railroad, or so many different things that are part of American history. The Civil War, I'm impressed with the important role that Iowans played, and Governor Kirkwood, of course, personally recruited a lot of the soldiers, and Governor Merrill actually donated the uniforms for some of the soldiers, and then donated his pension to help with some of the wounded soldiers from the war. So there's some just great Iowa examples that are part of American history that we want to make sure are included in the material. Other questions on this subject or other subjects you want to ask? Yes.
The press release says that the new recommendations coincide with this $100,000 grant. I mean, with this grant in the pipeline, and this just happens to come together in time for this press conference, or are there state dollars or any type of funding directed towards these recommendations?
Thanks, Barbara. Good question. So the governor had pulled together this advisory council, and we applaud him for that effort. And it just so happened that we learned about this federal grant opportunity, and it happened really fast. It was essentially at the beginning of the summer. We rallied around with the Department of Education, pulled it together, got letters of support from the congressional delegation, and we found out just a few weeks ago, literally. So it was coincidental, but again, a great opportunity to now be more collaborative in terms of how do we best implement these recommendations in a collaborative way, now having essentially an online tool for teachers to provide greater access to Iowa history.
Other questions? Other questions? Yes, I am. I'm going to Atlanta on economic development calls. So for the next 2 days, I'm going to be in Atlanta. And obviously, the companies we call on in these trips are confidential. You may know that I was recently, along with Debbie Durham, in Bentonville, Arkansas, and we called on both Walmart and Tyson. And it was really interesting in my meeting. And we met with the young president of Walmart. And I told him last time I flew into Bentonville, Sam Walton personally met me at the airport. And I went quail hunting with him. But he said, well, if he'd have known that, he would have personally met me at the airport. But at any rate, I think these calls are important. And I've done this throughout my tenure as governor, and they've led to some good things happening. And having personal contact with the decision makers in many of these companies, and the companies we're calling on, some of them already have operations in Iowa. So we're encouraging them to expand and grow in the state. Atlanta? Well, that's a good, I wasn't even aware of that, so thank you for giving me that information. But one of the benefits we do have in Iowa is very short commute time, and we don't have the congestion and the cost of living that are true in a lot of other places in the country. The companies I'm calling on, I think already have operations in Iowa. And there may be some others as well, but the primary ones I'm calling on already have operations here, and we're basically encouraging them to continue to grow in Iowa. Yes, Bill?
Sir, I wanted to ask you about the pipeline. You know, there's 30 people arrested up in Boone. Last week, people are saying that they're vehemently against it. They say that protests are going to continue. I want to ask your reaction to the fact that people are actively doing civil disobedience, trying to stop the pipeline, and the fact that a lot of them are saying that they're blaming you and saying that you directed the Iowa Utilities Board to do this. You have a lot of ties to Texas and rich Texas oilmen. There's a woman.
This is it's kind of laughable because there's probably nobody that big oil hates more than me. I am the strongest advocate for renewable energy, and Iowa leads the country in renewable energy. And I have consistently gone after big oil and the misinformation, the lies they've told about ethanol throughout. So there's nobody that is a stronger advocate or is more vehement about the need for renewable energy and has been an advocate for ethanol throughout and continues. In fact, I have pointed out that it was big oil that told the people in the East Coast and the West Coast the lie that ETBE was better than ethanol. And you know, it poisoned the groundwater, and they finally had to abandon MTBE and ban it. And then we got the renewable fuel standard, which now we want to continue to grow the share of our fuel that comes from renewables. But we don't expect that 100% of the motor fuel will be renewable. We do understand and we do appreciate the fact that we're seeing more production, both natural gas and oil now in the United States. That's one of the reasons why we have these two fertilizer plants being built, because the biggest cost of producing nitrogen energy is natural gas. Because of fracking, the cost of that in America has gone down, and we now have lower costs for manufacturing, and we're able to have fertilizer plants built here. With regard to the pipeline, this decision was handled through the normal process. I did not take a position on it. I said it's a decision that would be made by the Utilities Board. The Utilities Board, I think, was very thoughtful and very deliberative. They held hearings in every county. They spent a lot of time. They carefully researched it and made the decision that this was in the best interest to approve it. And it has strong support among a lot of the working people and building and construction trades in our state. I understand there's a few people, and most of the landowners have been very willing to sign easements and have this cross their property. And in fact, they are being very well compensated. And they'll still be able to use the land once the pipeline is put in place. So I think the process has been reasonable, and fair. They've exhausted all of their judicial remedies, and they've lost. I think we need to respect the process and the decision-making that's been made. As a governor, I really only have a role of appointing the citizens that serve on the utilities board. And I don't always agree with the decisions they make, but I respect the process and the decisions they've made, and I believe that it's important that we not interfere with the rights of the workers that are building the pipeline. What's that? Well, I'm not going to tell people what to do, and it's just important that people abide by the law and they not endanger themselves or the workers that are working on the pipeline. Well, as you know, we have very restrictive laws on the use of eminent domain. And the utility board has followed through and made the decisions on those. So I understand that you're never going to please everybody, but the vast majority of the landowners feel that they were treated fairly and appropriately compensated for the use of their land.
One thing I just wanted to clarify, though, Governor, you did go out in Texas, you did raise money down in Texas. Is that a fundraiser for you? They point to that. They say that proves that Branstad is the tool for this.
Oh, come on. I raised a lot more money from Iowa farmers and ethanol producers and people that are interested in wind energy and other things. Yes, I did get some support from my friend Rick Perry, who was a great governor and did a wonderful job of attracting business and jobs to Texas. And I think we can learn from each other. And I appreciate the support that he gave me, but it had nothing to do with oil. No. 5.1. 5.1 is what I understand. This is what David Roeder told me this morning. But revenue so far, the first 2 months, is basically flat. And that's because of what the EPA has done to the price of corn. Because they have not maintained the robust renewable fuel standard, and we've got a large crop out there. The price of corn, now this is the third year in a row. We had good prices up until the fall of 2013. But ever since, when the EPA created uncertainty and then reduced the renewable fuel standard below what the Congress intended, it's driven the price of corn below. And the last I knew, it was down below $3 a bushel here in Iowa. That's well below the cost of production. The result is not only a loss to farmers, but we have not seen the growth and expansion of our ethanol plants, and we're seeing a reduction in jobs in farm machinery manufacturing. Companies like John Deere and their suppliers, and companies like Kinsey Manufacturing. Now, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the impact that it's had on our state's economy, and I want to do everything I can to restore a strong renewable fuel standard, and that's one of the reasons why I think this presidential election is critically important. We need an EPA that is not going to work against farmers, not going to impose things like waters of the U.S., and not enforce the congressional intent under the renewable fuel standard.